Good afternoon. This is just our, our disclaimer slide. So really the mission of Origin is, like all of you, to have an impact on the future of medicine. And how we're doing this is we're creating the largest cell repository, and we want to basically create this living database of humanity, and we call it Life Capsule. And we want to use these cells to better understand the cellular and molecular foundations of disease, as well as use them for future therapies. We also want to take away the trial by error aspect of medicine by understanding differences, using these cells to understand differences between patients and being able to understand how patients with a certain disease could be subdivided potentially based on their individual characteristics. And then I'm going to touch on two programs that we have briefly of other ways we look to have an impact on the future of medicine. One is a program that we have in Tanzania, and another one is with Undiagnosed Disease Consortium. So the way we look at regenerative medicine is really we like the analogy with the internet of 1993. So who would have known that the internet was coming, in the 90s? And same thing with regenerative diseases. Like in 10 years from now, we won't even be thinking about our body breaking down or being able to, that it's unrepairable. I really think that in short order, we're going to have tools available to help our body repair itself a lot better than what we have today. So we kind of think of it as the internet, where you wouldn't have even been able to think about Google or Amazon or Uber or the iPhone in the early 90s. And academics has built a great foundation, but we really need to sort of industrialize the ecosystem to support the exponential growth that, I'm sort of preaching to the choir here. We're all seeing how this field is changing rapidly. And so really it's our mission to help drive the education, help create the capabilities, the ecosystems, and collaborations to help build upon this important foundation that we call regenerative medicine. Oops. So many of you know about induced pluripotent cells. You can see in the video cardiomyocytes that beating. So that's one of the cool things is when you take induced pluripotent stem cells and you differentiate them to heart cells, you can see them beating in the dish. And so what we do is we collect blood samples and then we reprogram them using the 4 factors and make our own induced pluripotent stem cells. And then we can differentiate these into a number of different cell types, just like the heart cells. So, and the other thing, there's a lot of evidence now that patient-derived iPS cells can recapitulate a lot of the disease phenotypes that you see in your body in the dish. So it really is a powerful technology. So Origin does 3 things. So first is building this biorepository that I mentioned that we call Life Capsule. And how we do this is somewhat unique. We crowdsource. In other words, we go to events, and I'll show you some pictures that are public events, and we ask people if they'd like to donate some blood towards Life Capsule. And then we also can bank these cells for consumers if they want access to them in the future. The second thing is life profile. So when we started going out into the public and asking people to donate some of their cells, they asked if we could tell them something about themselves. And so we decided, genetics is scary to a lot of people. It often is like bad news when you go to the doctor or when you think of your family history. And so we wanted to create these life profiles that were non-medical and really to help educate the public that genetics can also be fun. You can learn different things about your lifestyle, about your health. And so I'll talk a little bit more about this, but we have, again, it's direct to consumer. People can purchase these genetic tests around fitness because we're collecting samples at triathlons and marathons, also around skin health, your sensitivity to sun, and then nutrition, everything having to do with different food sensitivities, vitamins, how well your body processes and absorbs vitamins. So things that are good to know about yourself. And then the third thing is life systems. So that's what are we going to do with these cells that we're building this bank that we're building of cells. And the three cell types that we mainly focus on at the moment are cardiomyocytes, hepatocytes, and neurons. So with these cells, we can do disease modeling, and then also there's the potential for cells for therapy themselves. And so we look and collaborate with a number of scientists, both in academics and other companies. So this is just to give you a snapshot of our life profiles. We have Fit Code, which is around fitness. We go to Comic-Con, so we have a How Superhero Are You? We have the genetic skin assessment called Aura. And then the latest is the nutrition one on the far left, which is around genes. And so you can see, I also have a picture of the back of the box of these in which you can see that there's 4 different categories of genes in that profile. So it gives people an idea from of their genetic, how aspects of their genes and what they tell them about themselves. So these are just some pictures from some of our events. So on the right-hand side is actually from Beta Breakers. Those of you in California might be familiar with this. This is a race that goes from in the Bay Area. And you can see that people are lined up to donate their blood. And, the woman in the chair, she's got butterfly wings. This is an event where people dress up in fun costumes. And then the bottom left, people after they donate blood, they like to take selfies of, with their Band-Aid on their arm. So with life systems, we can look at how specific iPSCs and what their potential is to transform drug discovery. And so that's my background. I've spent over 20 years doing drug discovery, and probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I made a pact that I would never use an artificial cell line again, because the stem cells give you such good access to human cells and to human disease cells. So you can use in vitro type of assays to understand basic mechanisms of disease, as well as to test drugs, as well as to understand more about toxicity. And you can do comparative studies within diseases to look at how patient groups within a disease may segregate. And unlike primary cells, induced pluripotent stem cells basically are available in essentially unlimited quantities, and they can be delivered in a certain timetable, and people have found that you can differentiate them to any number of cell types in your body. So in terms of a trial by error approach, so you could take a group of patients, they have the same diagnosis, they get the same prescription based on the symptoms of their disease, and either the drug that they take may be toxic but beneficial, so that's not a good outcome. The drug may not be toxic but also may not be beneficial, or the drug could be toxic and not beneficial. And there's a subset of the people in which that drug could be not toxic and beneficial. So basically, when you go to the doctor, you get a prescription of a drug, and it may or may not work. And so I think really what we are trying to do is to develop means to be able to predict better what type of drug is best for which patient. Genetics helps that, but I think in conjunction, being able to study cells from different people in a dish will contribute a lot to that. So this is an example of how predictive taking iPSCs can be. This is work that had been published previously, not our own work, but I think it really illustrates as a nice case study of how personalized medicine can go a long way towards finding effective treatments. So this is a child with long QT syndrome, and basically it was a very serious case. He had a pacemaker and basically had to get 300 shocks in a month to keep his heart going. And if anybody doesn't know what that feels like, it's kind of like a kick in the chest every time you get a shock. And so what they did is they took some of his cells, they made pluripotent stem cells, and then differentiated them to cardiomyocytes. And then they went through a whole regime of testing different drugs to see what might be most effective to counter the long QT syndrome, the arrhythmia in the cells. And so on the right-hand side, you can see that the before, where he got 300 shocks in a month, and then on the right-hand side, where actually he really didn't need any shocks, and they found the right combination of drugs for treating this boy. So it was basically a successful management of this heart disorder. And this is just one example. There's a number of others as well. So just a few minutes on this program we have in Tanzania, because many of our events that we hold, most of our events that we hold now are in the U.S. So part of our effort is to look into ways of getting samples from other countries. So we've linked up to a physician who has a program in a number of countries. One of them is in Tanzania, where they found that if you build a clean water well in an area that doesn't have access to any medical care, people will come from all over to get the clean water. And you build a clinic in that same spot, and then they'll go and they'll get, be able to see get some medical care for themselves and for their children. And so this is a way that we're starting to get some samples from other places outside of the U.S. The other program that we have in terms of novel ways of for medicine, treating patients, difficult patients, is this Undiagnosed Consortium. And this started with a group of people, and actually a documentary film is being made. And the idea was to offer this group of people who have spent thousands of dollars going to many physicians, with their problems, their medical problems, to see if we can offer new approaches to their problems to help diagnose their disease. So basically, we joined a number of other companies to analyze these patient samples. We went to each of the families' homes, we collected samples, and then we distributed them to the various companies that I've listed here. So we looked, we made stem cells from these patients, and we did some genotyping. There were a number of other companies that looked at different aspects of these patients, including metabolomics, including sequencing, including microbiome. And then we all got together and distributed the information. And there's a number of these patients in which there's very strong clues in terms of what may be causing their disease. So this is a novel approach, to medicine using normally unavailable tests. But these technologies exist, and so some of it is trying to expand this effort and have more patients have access to some of these tests that are not yet available at conventional doctors. So the leadership team at Origin is listed here. Our two co-founders, Robin Smith and Kate Blanchard, are serial entrepreneurs. This is Robin's fourth company that he started, and we've been around for a little more than 2 years. And so just in summary, our mission is really to have an impact on the future of medicine by creating the largest cell repository that's a resource that we want to make available actually to the community. And we want to basically have it as a snapshot of humanity. I've listed just this weekend, we're going to be in Washington, D.C., Portland, Oregon, San Francisco, Missouri, Minnesota, Illinois, and New Jersey at events collecting additional samples. And as I said, we're going to use these cells. We've been using these cells to better understand foundations of disease, as well as the idea of having a ready source of cells for therapies. And then I talked about two programs that we have that are within the same mission around the future of medicine. And I thank you for your attention.